So today in the Meet the Lender series, I'm happy to be joined by Roger Morris from Tandem Bank. Roger, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, Gindy, my pleasure.
We've got some great tips now for first-time buyers and also some great tips about remortgaging up to 90% loan to value. So Roger, tell me a bit more about Tandem Bank and where you see yourself in the market today.
So Tandem Bank, Gindy, right at the heart of what we do is families. It's a residential lender that really wants to help aspirational families, first-time buyers, be able to buy their first home and make them feel safe. And for those that are existing homeowners that have had maybe a challenged credit file, have had some problems, we'll get into that detail in a moment, be able to help them with remortgages. So it's all about families. That's really the whole aim and message of Tandem Bank.
Brilliant. And it's fair to say that first-time buyers do need a boost when getting onto the property ladder. So can you tell me a bit more about what Tandem Bank are doing to help first-time buyers onto the property ladder?
Yeah, so let's think about this. Most families who are looking to enter the property ladder are renting at the moment. They normally will have had at least their first child, which if you went back a few years ago, that wasn't what would happen. They would actually buy the first home and then have the first child. And the reason that they haven't done that is literally the cost to be able to save up for a property. So the cost of that deposit, being able to save, and affordability. But what we've seen with the recent rise in interest rates in the last 2 years is that seeing the cost of rent go astronomical. I'm a landlord myself and I understand just how much rents have gone up and what it costs now to rent a property. It's cheaper to actually buy. And I think we've now created a new normality in acceptance of where interest rates are. They'll never go back, hopefully, to that 0.1%. I say hopefully, because that was a world tragedy event that caused that. So we've got a new norm. Interest rates have risen. This is the time to buy. So first-time buyers have two challenges. One is affordability, and I don't think you'll get a better time now to actually buy. And the second is a deposit. How do I get that deposit up? So at Tandem, we will do 90% loan to value. We will add our lender fees above. So that means you just need to put in 10%. So the options that we've got is one, if you've got the bank of mum and dad or any family member that would like to give you 10% deposit. And sometimes we're lucky enough and blessed to have a family member that is prepared to give the money. Or if you've got a family member selling a buy-to-let, so maybe Nan's selling a buy-to-let in Derby, and she wants to give 10% of that equity to her grandchildren who are buying that property. We're happy to do that.
Okay.
And third one, which is quite unusual, if they want to get a personal loan. So let me give you an example. You've got a couple, they both got two nice cars, and one of them says, do you know what, I don't need my car, I can use the bus or work from home. I'll sell it, but I want to keep that personal loan. And I'm going to use that personal loan towards my deposit. So you can mix and match. It can be 5% from a family member, a cash gift, and 5% personal loan, or it can be an equity gift. We don't need ultimately the customers to put in any form of their own cash. So a lot of high street lenders will still expect that first time buyer to have that 5%. We don't. So that 10% can be given, or it can be a personal loan. So we think that will help. And the typical customer, Gindy, that would come to Tandem will be somebody who's had some form of negative mark on the credit file. I call it selective amnesia. It's normally maybe being at university, being a mix-up of addresses, a bit of lack of ignorance. I mean, this is why I think we need more education in schools to explain the importance of being under voters' roll and keeping up your credit profile. So if you've got late payments on credit cards, you've had CCJs or a default, or maybe you've even been bankrupt or an IVA, there'll be always a solution that Tandem Bank can help you and your loved ones enter that housing market for the first time.
It's absolutely fantastic, Roger. So we've covered off some key things there. So not only personal loan as a deposit, but also if you've got some adverse credit in the past as well, a lender like Tandem Bank is willing to help you get onto the property ladder. So Roger, I've got another question for you. We mentioned at the moment it is difficult for first-time buyers to get onto the property ladder. I'm a keen believer, and I think that the government could possibly do more to help these first-time buyers get a property. What do you believe that the government can do to help boost first-time buyers getting onto the property ladder?
Well, realistically, I think the government are really challenged in that point. They've given zero stamp duty, so I think that in itself, for the main, that's really helped them. The affordability is a real concern, which isn't government related, it's regulated related, and it's about, do we increase the LTV caps and the income multiples? That's not really a government issue. I think that's a regulatory issue. But the last would be how you completely change the planning licensing rules. Prior to 1951, when planning was given on land, a good percentage of that land value went back to the local authority for infrastructure, schools, and it was a much more balanced view. Now, when it comes to planning, it's the landholder ultimately makes the money and the builders. And I think now we need to create a balance in that share play when it comes to who makes the money from a planning application. And it needs to go back in the favour of, I think, that first-time buyer. And I think until we change our planning rules, we're never really going to make it affordable, specifically people in the south. That's where the challenges come from. And it depends on where. If you were buying in Teesside at the moment, it's not really a problem. I think we've got to get a more geographical approach to planning. That's where I would ask the government.
Yeah, I agree. Very much agree. So Roger, we also talked about Tandem Bank and their initiative around remortgages. Remortgages, I believe, is a hot topic in 2024. What are Tandem Bank doing in order to allow more remortgages in 2024?
I think that's a really good and poignant question. So if you're watching this video now, which I assume you are, and you bought your first property a few years ago, let's say 3 years ago, or you remortgaged 3 years ago, and you're on an interest rate just over 1%, your new interest rate could be as much as 5%, and depending on your circumstances and what you need to do, could even be higher. Now, what you've maybe by experience and knowledge may have taken on more unsecured credit than what you expected. You didn't expect interest rates to rise as much as they did. The markets didn't. So it's not you. Everyone was kind of caught out a couple of years ago. And suddenly you realize that your interest rates are maybe going to go up £600-700 a month. So what can you do? What would my advice be? Would be to ring Create, speak to you, speak to one of the team, and to request a review. Look at your unsecured credit, and if the correct advice was given, let's say it was you, Gindy, the correct advice was to do debt consolidation, and you realize that maybe you're about to start or have been missing a few late payments on credit cards, maybe picked up some CCJs of defaults, maybe just come out of a bankruptcy. None of that statistically is a problem to lenders that can find the appropriate solution. And let's just say you pick Tandem, thank you very much, and you're going to do a debt consolidation. We'll work with you to be able to get that case offered. We won't charge an upfront valuation or an application fee for properties up to £700,000.
Very good.
And our legals, we do different to everybody else. We do them in-house. There's a zero charge for a standard remortgage, and all your unsecured credit will pay it off on day completion. And on average, from start to finish, we can do that from speaking to you to completing potentially in 2 weeks. And that can make a real difference, because if you're kept awake at night thinking, will the lender say yes? How do I make my next payment? How do I feed the children? How do I restructure my finances? With your advice and your help, that can be done as quickly as 2 weeks for zero costs when it comes to valuation, application fee and legal costs. So something to consider, Gindy.
Speed and service, very, very good. And I think we can agree that we need more flexible lenders like Tandem Bank in the marketplace. Now, one thing you did touch on, Roger, was you mentioned that interest rates potentially coming off a remortgage at 1% onto 5%. Interest rates are talked about quite a lot, and they have been over the last 18 months. What's your predictions on the interest rates for 2024, and When do you think that we could see a potential drop in the Bank of England base rate?
Okay, so we're recording this mid-March at the moment. We just had some really good economic data where the economy had improved by 0.3% recently. The last inflationary figures showed inflation at about 4%. It was actually 3.96. So the good news would be expected that the next inflationary figures will see a drop again. Though we are seeing fuel costs tick up a little bit, and some of the international shipping trade routes have been disrupted, which will put the cost of materials up. So what happens in the world does affect interest rates. My prediction would be, I think we will see an interest rate drop in May.
Wow.
And I potentially could see base rate being down to 4.25% by November. Now, I'm not a cynic, and I'm not saying this is potentially to coincide with a government election, but I think the economic trends would put the potential of a base rate of 4.25 by December. But you will see, as long as no other world events, a reduction in interest rates sensibly up to 4 times this year. You would see a stabilization of interest rates over the next 3 to 4 years at about 3.5%, 3.75%. So it won't see significant difference rates in what you're paying now, because lenders are all now being able to buy money with the anticipation of a rate drop. So rates that you'll be able to get from you over within 6 months will roughly be where they'll be over the next 5 years.
So none of the good days like the 1 to 2% interest rates at all?
No, we won't see them come back unless there's another world event or we go into a significant recession. We're going to see inflation at 2, and you will see a base rate at around 3 would give some real stability. So anyone expecting some big significant drops? No. House prices have stabilised, and as more landlords exit the market for different reasons, you'll see more starter homes that are more logical and affordable come on the market. So good time to buy, confidence in interest rates. Would I be going for a 5-year fixed or a 2-year fixed now? I think that would step into maybe advice, but I know what I would do. I would ring you and ask you.
So Roger, give you a situation. I'm a first time buyer looking to get onto the property ladder. What advice would you give me?
Always speak to a mortgage advisor. So why not a bank? Banks do not give advice. If you go into your bank and there's a mortgage advisor there, first fact, they can't give advice, because all they can do is talk about their products. That's not advice. When you think of how many lenders in the marketplace, potentially you as a mortgage broker, you could have up to something like 160 different lenders. That's advice. It's whole of market and coming up with who most likely is going to bid for your business on the day, who's got the cheapest rate or the best overall to pay. So never go to a bank for advice. That's why Tandem Bank does not give advice. You can't come to us direct. So if you want to know a bit more about Tandem Bank, go to Tandem for Intermediaries. That is kind of our intermediary website, not our generic website. It really gets you to the mortgages. And there's some useful information on there. But ultimately, what you want to do, if you want the best advice for you and your family, is to ring a mortgage broker. And if I was to pick my personal favourite mortgage broker out of 39,362 people who could speak to me, would be you.
Thank you,
And
Roger.
it's about trust and reputation.
That's really, really kind of you to say so. Thank you very much. So there you go. Some great insight into Tandem Bank today. And it's a pleasure to be joined by mortgage royalty, that is Roger Morris. So thank you, Roger, for joining Create Finance today. If you'd like to find out more about getting a mortgage as a first-time buyer, please check out our other videos.